All right. So I think we're up and running. I'm so sorry for the wait. I have a power issue, an internet issue. Starlink is not working properly, and the cell phone service here absolutely sucks. So that's the worst case scenario on everything. I think you guys are doing okay. Videos live, yes. Finally live. You good to go, Chris? Yeah. Yes. Well, thanks for tuning in. That was awesome. So I'm currently made it to Redcliff. It was windy. And I'm sweating too. So I want to see what you guys are watching from. So just want to see. We're starting soon. Yes, I started soon. As I mentioned, there was a lot of problems that happened with the stream. Normally, when I do a streaming, says that I make sure that everything happens and everything is up and running before clicking live. But when I click live on StreamYard or something, that's where everything starts to fall apart. So I have to check, okay, it's network, it's good. And Starlink is right now giving issues for some reason. So I'm like on mobile right now, on cell phone. So let's see how it goes for the internet access, how it works for the stream. Looking forward to see what's going on with this. But yeah, I was dealing with a lot of BS with the stream. That's what happened. Yeah. So, are you good, Chris? Okay. So we have a full pack house here. I'm gonna show you what it looks like on my end. Now, obviously, where I'm at right now is kind of like all the people are basically on the back. You can't see it, but you see what the clock is. People are starting to fill it up. So my hope is for people to come and join me on the front side, because that's where the speaker is going to be. And also that's going to be for me sound, because the floor is like a dance floor. And it's very live, and the sound can rebound very effectively here. So I hope that doesn't happen today. But yeah, about the unacceptable film situation. I don't know. I have to check the comments, because to be honest, I was like, when I do a live stream, I focus like 90% of my time on the cameras, on the sound, and the chat I check once in a while when everything is up and running. And by the way, if you want to contribute to this, I will absolutely appreciate some super chats, because this is absolutely important. And that's the only ways I make money these days, is just making some videos on YouTube, which is kind of cool. Hey, Cory! I got Cory Morgan in front of me. I just want to show it to him. Hey, Cory, when I show you in front of the camera, this camera right here. Oh, there. Yeah, right there. Yeah. So this is, it's live streaming right now with all my internet friends.
I can barely hear you on my bed.
Yeah, because you're gonna have to come back in here. I'm just gonna switch the cameras a little bit. You can just be on my side. You have to go back.
What's that?
Because I'm using my laptop camera here.
What's going on? Max is throwing a microphone in front of me, hasn't told me. I'm imagining it's the live feed. Looks like we're at another packed house out in Redcliff tonight. The movement's going great, and I'm looking forward to a hell of a meeting.
Yep. Absolutely. And thanks for coming in. Like, the setup here was so weird. It's like, I came here in advance, usually, but I have a problem with the internet last minute. I was one as one said, I push live. The internet just decided to kill itself. Yeah, anyways. Technical issues. So, yeah, so I want to show you to the crowd, see what it looks like here, you know. Oh. Okay. Just give me 2 seconds. I'm gonna check the cameras a little bit. I'll be right back in a second.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. How is everybody this evening? Thank you so much for coming out. We've got a great crowd here. It may not look like it in the chairs, but everybody's sitting at the tables back there. So, a couple of things before we get started. The bathrooms, the men's is down the stairs, and the ladies is to the left as you go out these doors. The emergency exits are here, there, and over there. There'll be 3 speakers tonight. I'll be speaking first. My name is Sheane Meikle. The second speaker will be Mr. Cory Morgan, and the third speaker will be Chris Scott. And we're going to have very short speeches because the important part is your questions and answers. So we'll get started, and I'll go through. And what I talk about is the historic relationship between Alberta and Ottawa. So without further ado, I'll get started. So in the 1880s to about 1905, 1904, 1905, there was a huge American settler movement that came into the Northwest Territories at that time. And Ottawa was very worried that the Northwest Territories would get absorbed by the United States. And so that was one of the fundamental reasons why Alberta and Saskatchewan were formed. How many here have ever heard of the little spit on the map called USONA? Nobody. One person. You heard me talk already. Okay, you don't count. I actually live about 6 miles from USONA. At one point in time, it had a population of over 500 people. Now it has a population of 5. The little place called USONA stands for the United States of North America. How many here know the town of Rimbey? There, we got much more there. Its original name was Kansas Ridge. There's a little hall out where the community was formed out near where I live as well. It's called the Dakota region. The city of Airdrie, its original name was Yankee Valley. So the Ottawa was very, very, very worried about absorbed, and it's a lot easier to absorb a territory than it is a province. And in 1903, the then Minister of the Interior made the following quote: "We desire, and all Canadian patriots desire, that the great trade of the prairies shall go to enrich our people to the east, to build up our factories and our places of work, and in every legitimate way to our prosperity." Now, why is that so important that a given Minister of the Interior would say that? Well, his name was Sir Clifford Sifton, and he was one of the main architects of the Alberta Act and the Saskatchewan Act. In 1905, on September 1st, the Alberta Act came into being, as well as the Saskatchewan Act. And what that did is gave Alberta and Saskatchewan the rights and responsibilities of a territory, but the name of a province. And it was mainly done as a way to block the United States from taking the Northwest Territories. In 1913, the Railway Act amendments were brought in. Now, what did that do? Well, up until that time, the regional railways were able to go wherever they wanted to. They could share lines with their neighbor to the east or to the west, and they could move product everywhere. But as of that, it made it so the regional railways could not cross provincial boundaries. So if, let's say you were loading in Stettler with grain, and you were headed to Thunder Bay, you would hit the Saskatchewan border. You would have to unload your cars, reload them onto the Saskatchewan Central Railway, and then do the same at the Manitoba border, and the same at the Ontario border before you get your product to Thunder Bay. Now, the interesting thing is there was a lot of flack from the east, so they gave an exemption to the eastern railways. Now, how did this end up affecting the Western railways? Well, by 1939, 90% of them were out of business. And the last one went out of business in 1971. But by then, they'd already been bought by what is now known as CN Rail. And they were formed in 1943 from the scraps of all the regional railways. In 1930, you had the Natural Resources Transfer Agreement. Now, that gave all of the resources to the provinces. But at the time, the federal government said, except you, Saskatchewan and Alberta, we're still going to control your resources. In 1931, on December 11th, the King signed into being the Statute of Westminster. Now, what did that do? There's a lot of misinterpretation of the Statute of Westminster, but the thing that it did do is it gave the sovereignty over land and resources to the people in care of the provinces, not in care of Ottawa, in care of the provinces. So that meant that there, legitimately in this province, there are no federal lands. We have not been enforcing it, but if we had enforced it, Jasper would never have happened because we would have been managing it. In 1935, a new marketing board was formed, the Canada Wheat Board. When it first formed in 1935, it was a voluntary organization. But by 1943, it became mandatory for Western Canadian farmers. Now, what did that mean? That meant if I lived in Ontario and I wanted to sell my grain to the United States, I could pull up to the grain or to my grain bin, load my truck, and I could take it down to the States and sell it. If I lived in Western Canada, I could pull up to my grain bin, load my grain truck, pull it into the nearest elevator, offload it, pull around to the far end after it had been bought and sold back to me by the wheat board, and then I could ship it to the U.S. So you had to pay a middleman in order to sell your own grain, but only Western Canada had to do that. Now, the Canada Wheat Board stayed in effect until 2012. One of the main reasons that it finally fell was because of 13 farmers that decided that it was worth it to put themselves in jail. We have the daughter in here. I got to see her. Put your hand up. Where'd she go? Of one of them. She approached me before. Oh, there we go, right there. He wasn't put in jail. Right. Yeah. But there were 13 farmers that actually did run the border, and they spent from 6 months to a year in jail. And Western Canadian farmers got so upset that finally we got Ottawa to do something, and they got rid of the wheat board in 2012. From 1947, just after the discovery of oil in the province, to 1950, the federal government took control of all of our oil pricing and our pipelines. That meant that we did not set our prices. Ottawa set the price that we could sell our oil at. And we could not lay any pipelines without their permission. In 1950, they finally called that off, and we were back to being able to set our prices. How many in here are old enough to remember the great flag debate of 1965? We've got a few in here. By the time I entered school in the early 1970s, it had already been memory hold. But in 1965, when they were deciding upon a flag that represented Canada, then Premier Pearson decided that he wanted the sugar maple as the representation for all of Canada. Diefenbaker stood up in the House of Commons, and he very clearly made it clear that he thought that the Manitoba maple or the box elder should be the leaf used on the flag as it was found from coast to coast, whereas the sugar maple is only found in eastern Canada. Pearson decided that he was not going to debate this, so he did closure on the bill and forced a vote, and not a single Western Canadian MP voted for the current maple leaf. It was so much animosity at the time that in 1967, during Canada's centennial, many towns and cities in this country or in the West did not fly the maple leaf. They flew the red ensign. And most people do not realize that till this day, we actually have two official flags. We have the red ensign and we have the maple leaf. And for Western Canadians, the maple leaf is not a representation of us. And for some reason, by the early 1970s, they had memory hold it, and I didn't know anything till I was researching it years later. In 1973 to 1974, they brought in the oil export taxation policies, and Alberta's oil profits were capped. Now, how many in here remember us all being told that we were in an energy crisis? There wasn't enough oil to go around. Well, if you were an oil company and you had been given a cap on your oil that you could produce, and anything over that, you had to pay the profit straight to Ottawa, would you pump it out of the ground? Exactly. And so for it was a year and a half that we had to fight Ottawa over that. And our then Premier Lougheed fought them and successfully in 1974 got them to repeal it. But they weren't done with us yet, because in 1980 they brought in the National Energy Program. And the National Energy Program had everything that the previous program had in it, plus they now could set the price that we had to sell to the East at. And the East was given priority on sales over any other sales that we could come up with. So that stayed in effect until 1988. Now, the Prime Minister at the time that repealed the National Energy Program was Brian Mulroney. But in case you think that he did it because he was magnanimous for the West, the only reason that he did it is that oil prices had dropped so low that it cost more to enforce the program than they were getting out of it. And that is the reason that the National Energy Program was finally repealed. In the 1980s, you also had the Canadian Constitution be brought home. And then you had, in later 80s, you had the first Quebec referendum. Into the 90s, you had the second Quebec referendum. And we can actually thank Quebec for the Clarity Act, because it was after the second one, the federal government went to the Supreme Court and said, is it legal for a province to leave Confederation? And the Supreme Court came back, yes, but they must follow these steps to do so. And that is where they legislated the Clarity Act. And that is what we are working on right now, is fulfilling the steps of the Clarity Act. We'll jump forward to 2012. And Bill C-38, the Jobs, Growth, and Prosperity Act, came in. And what that did is it gave Ottawa control over all of Alberta's projects. That meant we could not lay a piece of pipe. We could not build a road. we could not build a skyscraper without first getting approval from Ottawa. The Jobs, Growth, and Prosperity Act. In 2016, federal carbon pricing was brought in, and we all know how that hit our oil industry. In 2019, Bill C-69, the No More Pipelines, and the C-48, the tanker ban on the West Coast, were both brought into being. Now, those four bills were the subject of the MOU that Premier Smith had signed with Carney last fall. But within 1 week of that being signed, the House of Commons voted to make it null and void. So though we're still under all four of those bills to this day. And that brings us to the current day. Right now, sitting in the House of Commons on first reading is Bill C-8. And in the Senate on first reading is Bill C-9. Bill C-9 has already passed the House. It's just waiting to pass the Senate. And what they do, they work hand in hand together. The first one, Bill C-8, is the Internet Censorship Bill. And that means that with a stroke of the minister's pen, they can wipe you off the Internet. And you have no recourse under that bill to appeal it. And that one is fairly serious, but Bill C-9 is even more, because that is the anti-hate speech bill. And that means that if somebody complains, a meeting like this tonight, that somebody decides to complain under that bill, we could all be deemed as guilty of spreading hate speech. And without trial, they can lock us up, and they can take all of our assets if they deem it serious enough offense. So, in my not so humble opinion, our only recourse going forward is independence to get out from underneath that. Okay, well, I would like to thank you very much. Thank you for listening to me. And at this time, I would like to invite Mr. Cory Morgan to come up. And I don't think I really have to introduce Cory too much, but he is an author. He is a reporter or correspondent with the Western Standard. And he'll tell you the rest. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm also just a stubborn Western independence advocate who's just not willing to give up. And there's more and more and more of us, and it's just thrilling. We're making history right now. We're taking part in it. We have a chance to make it. We have a chance to screw it up, too. I'll talk a little bit about that. So some of my history, I mean, Sheane laid it out really well. You know, this system is broken. We've had a history, this federation, where every move from the West has always had to be a battle. We always had to try and grab our own rights back, our own authority, and have the ability to control our own affairs. We shouldn't have to struggle like that in a proper federation. But we've always been considered essentially a colony. There's a vanity among some who think that somehow the perfect constitution was created and we don't need to change it. We got to remember when this nation was built and when Alberta came in 1905, we were a tiny percentage of the population of the country. We still punched above our weight in resource because of agriculture was the big thing at that time. But as far as population went, it wasn't that large. And they weren't looking ahead. I mean, again, people were vain. They didn't think it's not going to grow that much. It'll always be that way. So we can build a system that focuses on the center where, in their minds, it's important. And the West is just there to service that. And it hasn't changed. Our demographics have changed. Our attitudes have certainly changed. But the system hasn't changed a bit. And that's what, I want to be clear on with a lot of things. Like the maple leaf flag. I don't have a problem with the flag. I don't have a problem with Canadians. I don't have a problem with Canada. I have a problem with the system. An out-of-date, broken system that doesn't allow for regional disparity, regional autonomy, and protecting individual rights. If I thought there was a way that the system could be changed from within, if I really thought that, I would probably pursue that route. But I was a young political geek back when Meech Lake and Charlottetown was going on, and I was watching that closely. Those were the last serious attempts to change our system, and they didn't even come close to coming through. So if we think that we could make the sort of changes the West needs to have within the constitutional framework we have, you're dreaming in Technicolor. We can't even do the minor ones, and we need major ones. So the catalyst for change, the only one I can see, and the Clarity Act provides it, is through a yes vote for a referendum on independence. And for the first time in Western Canadian history, we're going to have that vote this fall. Now, we are fortunate. I mean, we've got a lot of things that have infringed on our freedoms. But it was almost a mistake on the part of the federal government, I think. They didn't realize that the West would ever use the Clarity Act. That was more something to deal with Quebec. But the Clarity Act laid out the framework for independence, the path, and it's not an easy one. It's a convoluted one, but there is one, and it's a legal one. And most importantly, it's a peaceful one. We don't have to go to a civil war like so many countries have had to do around the world. We can vote our way out of this. And that's a real fortunate thing to have. And people thinking that borders are immutable, that they should never change, look at a map of Europe and just, you can go on the internet and see 10 years at a time, from 1900 until currently, and look how many countries changed borders. Sweden and Norway. And it's such a symbolic year, 1905, the year that Alberta came into being. They held a referendum to split because they were actually one union, those two. And now they're two separate, distinct nations living next to each other, but they have passportless border crossing. They did it through referenda just like us, and they're stronger for it. We don't have to be at each other's throats. I'm not looking to become independent to hurt the rest of Canada. I think we could have a better relationship with Canada post-independence. Might be some ruffled feathers for a couple of years first, for sure. But we can be better in the long run. We've got to build something, not just move away from something. This is where we have to shift a bit towards the positive. We know the negative. And that's kind of what brought us out. And we got a lot of the positives, not just for ourselves, though, even Canada. I like using a lot of analogies. Think of it like a motor that's just too old. You're constantly patching it. You're constantly fighting with it. The oil leaks are coming out here. The parts are wearing out over there. Eventually, if you want to save that motor, you've got to tear that whole thing down and rebuild it. You can't keep tinkering with it. The old motor of Canada's system is beyond repair. And we've got an opportunity. So, as I said, I was stubborn. I started the Alberta Independence Party in 1999. I determined that the system was broken then. And we made a bit of noise. I smacked my face against the wall leading that party into the election against Ralph Klein, who really showed me what it's like to lose an election. And we fell apart, like so many independence movements do. But I learned a lot. And we keep doing this cycle. Before me, it was the Western Canada concept, WestFed. These other things. Later on, we didn't really see a big ripple until Wexit kind of came along. But even then, that was a big... you got that? Okay. At least it wasn't mine this time. We saw a groundswell of Western discontent as we keep seeing. And Wexit came along, everybody was worked up, but that kind of calmed down and fell back again like it always does. But then COVID came along. COVID really changed people's mindsets. People who'd gotten complacent, maybe upset, maybe frustrated with the government, but still thought, well, for the most part, they're all right. For the most part, things are peaceful. For the most part, I'm doing okay. And suddenly people found out how quickly, how easily the state can shut down your place of business, can shut down your church if you're a person of faith, can stop you from traveling, can keep your child from going to school, to stop you from visiting family, from going to a funeral. This is not a country where we have rights. They were imprisoning people for doing business. Chris Scott, who's going to talk, arrested for the crime of serving burgers. I mean, there's some places that their food is criminal. But honestly, the food's good at the whistle stop, so you couldn't get him on that. But that's symbolic of how hysteric and bad things got and how quickly our rights were swept aside. And people realizing even though all of that has faded, not a single thing has changed. We're one more virus away from being locked down again. So people started to realize we've got to change something. Now, something that came about after that was Take Back Alberta. David Parker out there, he had a beef with Jason Kenney, well, over the vaccine passports and some other things. But he did something different. He went to rooms like this all over the province, and he utilized the mechanisms, the tools, the system against itself. He realized you only have to win all the constituency associations. You don't have to win the whole province. And by selling thousands of political memberships, he turned over a recently elected conservative premier in Alberta without even an election being held. Some can say that's good or bad, but it was amazing what he pulled off. And honestly, when you see David and I together, we don't agree on a lot of things. But I have to respect what he did with that organizational thing. And it also taught Albertans that we can stand up and change things that we previously had left alone. Premier Smith's in. Look what happened with the engagement, though. I remember Progressive Conservative Party AGMs in the 90s. This was a party that was in full power with a huge majority, and at their AGMs there'd be maybe 1,000 people. Now, Red Deer, an AGM, 6,000 people paid, I don't know, $150 each to come out and participate in a political convention. Edmonton, 3,000. You have to pay me to go there most of the time. And they spent their own money to go there. But this is people becoming engaged, realizing they have to be part of the process. They have to take part, and it's remained. And that same attitude now has maintained through what the APP has done and what we're seeing all over the place right now. This galvanized, organized group of people who are working to make change we never had before. And it keeps surprising me as I'm going around to these speaking events. These rooms are constantly full. This thing isn't fading. It's a year later. A year ago from now, I thought, great, things are going excellently, but maybe a year from now it's going to be calming down. No, it's getting stronger and stronger. And I'd like to ask, or Chris asks or anything, it's an important question at every one of these. It's the only quiz I give anybody. But if everybody raise their hands if it's the first time they've been to a meeting like this before. There's a good couple dozen folks in here. And we've been seeing 20 to 50% in the rooms recently, with new people coming out to these. This is a living movement. This isn't a bunch of people getting together to drink each other's bathwater and cry on each other's shoulders about the Federation. This is actually drawing newly activated people. And we've got, 7,000, I believe, people who actually registered or more to be petitioners to get the referendum going. That's a commitment. That's giving your ID, that's signing up, that's doing these things. People always thought their civic duty was just to get up and vote once every 4 years, and sadly, only 60% of them often did it. But to have upwards of probably getting into the realm of 10,000 people now ready to get on the ground and work on something like that, you can make an incredible amount of change. And it's steamrolling. We're working towards something. I said earlier there's going to be a referendum this fall. And something that's hard with this, as I said, we've never had one in Alberta. I can't call somebody up and say, what did you do in the last Western referendum on independence? We don't have a rule book. We're in uncharted waters. I am surprised by this accidental formula for organization that's sort of come about. There's no particular leader, there's no René Lévesque, there's no party, there's no Parti Québécois or something that's leading this. There's not just one group, though APP certainly did a massive amount of groundwork. And Stay Free does, but there's a number of different groups or individuals working, and it's working. It's working. It's still active. These flags are sprouting up all over. These meetings are coming together. People are knocking on doors. They're engaging like we've never seen before. But we still have a ways to go. Politically, whether she wants it or not, Premier Smith has to have an election or a referendum this fall. And I know some people think that she might want to hold it up. Look, she could have shut this down months ago. quite easily. Could have just said, the court said it's unconstitutional, I wash my hands. Sorry, guys, it's just the way it goes. Instead, she brought about Bill 14. And then we got this going through the courts and other stuff like that. The bottom line is the authority to hold a referendum still, in the end, whether it's through petitions or whatever, still lies in the Premier's office. That's the only one who can actually schedule and call a constitutional referendum. Just looking at the political aspect of it, with all of this engagement, with these thousands of people who want to hold this vote, if she corked that bottle and said you can't have it this fall, all that energy is going to turn against her. And I'm not asking people to do that. I think she won't need to come to that. They realize that. She will be the next Jason Kenney. Those thousands of people who have been working their butts off for months are not just going to throw their hands up and say, well, she just won't let it happen. No, they're going to go to all those constituencies. They're going to change the nominations. They're going to work towards a leadership change. Politically, she just has to let it happen, whether she wants a yes vote or not. And I don't know where she lands on it, but she's been pretty favorable in looking towards having it happen. So through this convoluted path, we're going to get the vote, but still the hardest part of all to come, we've got to win it. And I mean, if a vote was held tomorrow, I don't think we would yet. We got polls that are bouncing all over the map, which goes to show you how little value there is in polls. I've seen them as low as 17% support and as high as 42%. That's a huge spread. That's garbage. So at best, let's split that difference. Let's say it's 35 right now. And what I can say anecdotally from getting around, doing these things, being out in public in general or in media, I think there's a 35 fully committed, ready to go if a vote were held tomorrow. There's a good 30% saying absolutely no way, it's never going to happen. I'm not going to vote yes in my lifetime. But there's still that big chunk of mushy middle that's not sure. They're thinking about it. They're considering it. They're undecided. And that's who we have to reach in this next 5 months. And it's going to be hard. Again, we don't have that structure. So that's what I talk a lot about. We aren't a political party. A lot of people are at meetings like this for the first time. They aren't experienced campaigners. They haven't done something like this before. So this is how we network with each other and help with this, because the task is ours. To ask somebody who's sitting on the fence to vote yes in an independence referendum, that's a big personal ask. That's a big decision for people. They're going to take it very seriously. And we can fight over the facts and figures about equalization or rights and things like that, and they're all important. But if they feel emotionally attached to the old system, the emotions will still make them vote no. And to deal with an emotional case with somebody, that takes engagement one-on-one with a person. Not a brochure, not an opinion writer like me, not a worked up YouTube video I put out or something like that, or meetings like this. That takes engagements one-on-one between Albertans, sometimes multiple ones, having respectful conversations and bringing people along, because this is the path to go on. But we can't force people onto that path. We have to engage them and pull them into it. I mean, the number one thing I talk about when you take it on in as your own mission to bring over those undecideds. When you get those opportunities, the guy you drink next to in the bar, the person at the sporting event you go to regularly, the person at work you chat with on a coffee break. How can you bring them over? The best thing is ask them. Don't tell them. They're Albertans. We don't like being told what to do. Ask them. Start that respectful conversation. What is holding you up? Why do you feel we should stay? What are the problems you think are happening, though? How do you think they could be solved without independence then? These conversations can take time and they can take a lot of repetition. We should take it upon ourselves to start those conversations over this next couple of months. I don't know what's going to happen exactly. As I said, in this stretch, the petitioning is going to end right away here, that phase. And then whether a referendum is scheduled, for October, say, whether it comes a week from now or 2 months from now, I don't know. What if it's 2 months from now? I fear us losing this momentum. The petitioning has actually given people something to do, a way to get out, to engage people, to set up on the highways, to knock on doors. And if we sit for 2 months without that to chew on, there's a chance things could slow down. I hope to be wrong, because I thought things were going to slow down by now anyways, and they haven't, so that's great. But I think we've got to take it on ourselves to make sure it stays active over this next couple months. There's no law or anything says you can't knock on your neighbor's doors and go out and start talking about these things. None. Some people are saying you can't start campaigning until there's a campaign period. That's not true. You can always talk to your fellow Albertans at any time. You can't start advertising and a whole bunch of other things. But you can engage and you can get out there and you can take it on. Look for those opportunities. So the two things, I guess, is going to be asked, we'll get to the Q&A, which is really important with this, is how can I keep engaged over this next 2 months to keep it rolling and keep it big? And how can I best strategically reach out and move people over to that yes side? And I'll leave with one final thing, that 30%. I heard a good analogy at a packed room in Calgary last night. They talked about it being a red light, green light, yellow light. You know, with green light, we got the people who are definitely fully on board. And the red lights, well, they're never going to be on board. And they'll let you know quickly enough, don't worry. And the yellow ones are the ones we really want to talk to. And I was talking to somebody over there about an analogy I use. We only got so much energy in us to campaign and do things. Don't waste your energy on the red light people. You're never going to move them, never. And don't waste your time on the green light people aside from socializing. They're already there. Channel your energy to where it can be productive in identifying those people in the middle and seeing how you can move them over, and you'll be most effective in doing it. So thank you for your time right now. I'll let Chris get up here and talk for a little while, and we'll get on to the question and answer. So I guess I'll introduce, it's Chris Scott from the Whistle Stop campaign, the raving criminal who served burgers and put us all at terrible risk. It's a great Reuben there too. Thanks, Cory.
I like to move around a lot, so I don't want to have an accident here. Well, good evening. Thank you all for coming out tonight. It's great to be down here. This is, I think, the third or fourth time I've spoken in this venue, and it's generally always a packed house, which means that you folks down here, you care and you're engaged, and you care about the future of your province. Is that kind of correct? Well, thank you for that. So this is not a speech. If you've been to any of my events before, you know that I don't write speeches. I never prepare anything. I deliver 3 or 4 of them on the drive down. They're the most earth-shattering, life-changing speeches you would ever hear in your life. They would bring anybody to our side, to our cause, but I forget them by the time I'm here. But I guarantee you they were great. This is a letter that I got, and I'm just going to read you the first page. It's quite a lengthy letter. I think there's got to be 10 or 12 double-sided pages here. So I'm going to read you the first paragraph. I understand your organization named above to be a separatist organization advocating for Alberta's secession from Canada. Now this is actually addressed to the Alberta Prosperity Project, and that is not this organization. As a matter of fact, Let's Talk Alberta isn't an organization. It's just a group of people expressing their views. If achieved, secession would be of grave and foundational importance to each Albertan. It would be a profound and momentous change. Therefore, all Albertans are entitled to receive from your organization solid proof that your secession plans are detailed, comprehensive, fully thought out, and, most importantly, realistic. So this letter, it is quite obviously, to me, written from the perspective of somebody who is not on board with the idea of Alberta sovereignty. That's quite clear. But what caught my attention was the fact that this person wrote it at all. Now, why would somebody write a letter like this, a very, I would say, well thought out letter with probably, I think there's maybe 40 or 50 questions in here and a lot of history. Why would they do that if what we're talking about wasn't something that could ever happen or wasn't a possibility for Alberta? Would people be taking time out of their days to come to these events, to write letters like this? And believe me, this is not the first letter I've gotten like this. This morning, I arrived home at 2:30 a.m. from our last event in Calgary, and I was up at 8, and I spent the first, 4 hours of my day going through some Facebook comments with a whole list of questions. And if you know, you know. There's questions and there's question bombing. You know, like every question you could think that has to be asked about an independent Alberta is asked. So I took some time and I went through it. Now, I've compiled quite a database over the last few years of these things. I think about them all the time. I read about them. I research. I look at history and how things have gone. And so I have quite a database. And now I can take a list of questions like that, I can run it through AI, and it will pull from everything I've done in the last 5 years and spit out responses to all these things, which is very handy because I get the same questions a lot, like a lot. And in that letter, I would say roughly 3/4 of those questions are questions that I have specifically answered at meetings just like this. It doesn't make them irrelevant, and it doesn't mean that people shouldn't ask, but this is why we're doing these events. We need to get this conversation to every corner of Alberta, to every Albertan. We need to have these conversations. I am blessed to be able to come and speak my mind, share my views, and express myself in this way. And part of that blessing comes with being able to engage directly with people who may or may not agree with my views. And so I know there are some in this room today who don't agree with my views, and thank you very much for being here. I'm looking forward to your questions. So the reason I say all that is because, there's this, well, not so much now, but up until recently, this whole idea was just blown off as never happened. Small fringe minority. You're just a bunch of dirty separatists. We're going to ignore you. And now all of a sudden that's changing. The tone is changing. It's no longer, oh, it's never going to happen. It's, oh, it can't happen because of this. What does that mean? That means people are realizing that this is a possibility, and we need to have the conversation, because the question that each one of you are going to be asked in October is not to be taken lightly. This is not a small thing. The question that you're going to answer will have serious and lasting implications for not only your future, but the future of your children and their children. And since that's the case, and since it is almost inevitable that this question is going to be asked of you, we need to start talking about it. In that letter, I would say being gracious, I would say maybe 40% of the comments that are made in that letter are assumptions of one fact, not quite realistic. And we see that a lot. As a matter of fact, I would say at least half of the conversation, half of the questions that we get are based on assumptions of law or history or politics or something like that that don't really hold much water. But we have to talk about those as well, right? We need to sort through the fluff, find the facts, and get to a place where we can confidently answer that question. Would you agree with that, at the very least, regardless of what side of the fence you're on, right? We can't do that if we spend all our time spinning our wheels, dealing with things that are, I don't want to say irrelevant, but not as relevant as the main points. So getting to some of the main points. I am well aware that in a democracy, if there's something you don't like, that's just kind of the way it is. Not everybody's going to agree on everything. And there's nothing wrong with that. We're allowed to have differing opinions. Sometimes we're going to be happy with government, sometimes we're not going to be. What I've realized about Alberta and Western Canada within Confederation is no matter how unhappy we become with the state of the Federation or the way things are going or the policies that affect our lives or the governance that governs us, there's really not very much we can do about it. We've tried everything from the West wants in, with the Reform Party, that was the slogan. We want a seat at the table. We want to participate in Confederation. We're grown up now. It's time our voices were heard. To what can we do to insulate ourselves against a federal government that may not be aligned with what Alberta wants, in the Harper area, with the firewall letter and those types of things. We've tried those things. We've tried asking for constitutional amendments. A good example is a referendum we had here in Alberta during the Jason Kenney tenure, where he asked Albertans if they wanted to continue with the equalization program. 62% said no, which means Alberta doesn't agree that they want to be governed in that way or have a policy that affects them in that way, and nothing happens. Why? Because it can't happen. That's my problem. All of the individual policies are less important to me than the overarching concern that as a Western Canadian, you cannot effectively influence the outcome of not only a federal election, but the policies and legislation that federal government imposes on us in those 4 years. And if history has shown us one thing, That happens over and over and over again, and we haven't been able to do anything about it. I used to be the guy that said, I want a referendum on Alberta independence because I want leverage. We've never had leverage, right, with the federal government. Quebec has some leverage, and they got a pretty decent deal. I wanted leverage so we could fix some of these things. I wanted to be able to have the Constitution opened and make some of these things that create an inequity between East and West remedied, so that we could be unified, so we could be strong and free from sea to shining sea, so that I didn't feel awkward about the Canadian flag tattooed on my back. This whole thing was to make me comfortable about my tattoo, by the way. I wanted that. And in my pursuit of this question that we're going to be asked, I made a startling discovery, and that was, this isn't a system that's broken. It's not a system that was supposed to be equitable. On the contrary, it's working exactly as it was intended. And Sheane shared a little bit. He gave you that quote that Minister of the Interior Clifford Sifton delivered in 1903 or 4 in the steps of the Winnipeg legislature. We desire, and all Canadian patriots desire, that the great trade of the prairies go to build up our factories and places of work and enrich our lives in every conceivable way, that kind of quote. That was in 1903, before Alberta existed. And to this day, that quote rings true. Whether it's the Wheat Board or the CFIA or the No More Pipelines bill or any of these things, that has been true right from the beginning. And as I came to this realization that this is the way it was intended to be, I started thinking, well, if that's the way it was intended to be, if Albertans are unable to effectively influence the laws that govern them, we don't actually live in a democracy. We're kind of like subjects. We're slaves to somebody else's will. We don't have the sovereignty that we should have to chart our own course forward. The whole point of having provinces and provincial jurisdiction and provincial sovereignty within a country as big as Canada is that not all of us are going to share the same values. That's why countries historically get smaller. They don't get bigger. Because as populations increase, the divide is wider. People are more different. Their values change. They're not aligned. And they don't want to be governed under the same laws. So the purpose of having provinces that are sovereign, and we're supposed to be sovereign in most of these jurisdictions, is that so we can peacefully coexist. It isn't supposed to be a situation where we just have to go along with what's done to us. That doesn't work, and it causes a lot of resentment and anger. How many people in this room have felt angry at the federal government in the last 10 years? Almost everybody, for one reason or another. And this is not a partisan thing. This is not a left or a right thing. This is Albertans have never been able to effectively control their futures. And that is a big problem for me. It's a big problem. I only got involved in this because I found myself staring the government down. I was in a position where I had to choose fight or flight. I was backed into a corner. Things had affected me to the point where I was in that position, and I chose to fight because I'm Irish and Russian, and I guess that's just what we do, although just ignore the Russian part for now. Interesting story about my Russian ancestry. My grandmother's grandfather, he lived in Russia in the late 1800s, I guess, and he was actually arrested because he was one of the guys that burned the Tsar's guns. He wouldn't fight. They put him in Siberia, shackled him, sores all over his legs, the whole 9 yards, and the Tsar had a son and was so happy he pardoned all of the political prisoners. That's how my ancestry ended up in Canada, by way of England and the United States. So an interesting story there. I guess the civil disobedience is in my blood. Thank God that we don't live under a czar that would do something like that to me. But it was kind of unpleasant. So I went through some things that I never thought that I would go through as a Canadian. I'm a Canadian citizen, and I always will be, by the way. We'll talk about that in question period if you want. And I have been jailed, not for serving hamburgers. I was actually jailed for the crime of protesting what my government was doing. I have also attended church services illegally under cover of darkness, hiding from my government because I knew that we would be fined or arrested for attending church services. I had a judge say that I had caused immeasurable and irreparable harm to the people of Alberta without ever having seen any evidence to support that. Even the government lawyers were like, what the heck is this? We never said that. And then told me that before I expressed my views, I had to deliver the government's message about vaccines. You know, not everybody goes through these things. And if I hadn't gone through those things, I probably wouldn't have been activated and moved from a place of political apathy and laziness, to be fair, very lazy, to a life of advocacy. We only get involved when something affects us. And that's not partisan, that's not a left or right thing either. But something affected me. I started fighting for my survival. And one of the things I had to do to fight for my survival was learn. I had to dig into the Constitution. I had to dig into the Charter Rights and Freedoms. I had to go back even to the BNA Act. I drove to Parksville in the middle of one of the worst blizzards I've ever seen, on the number 3, by the way, the Crow's Nest Pass. That was, ask Jessica, it was terrifying. There's still claw marks in the shit handle or whatever it's called. To meet with the last signatory of the Charter Rights and Freedoms, the Honorable Brian Peckford. I drove out there. I sought out the people that knew the information because I needed to know, because I needed to survive, and I needed to make a difference. I needed to change things. The education that I've been forced to endure over the last 5 years is more than I've learned in the rest of my life. This is why we need things like Let's Talk Alberta. I am not funded by Donald Trump. I'm not funded by the Americans. When I started this group, or whatever we call it, tour, speaking thing, I phoned my friend Sheane and I said, Sheane, we're going to do this tour. You're the coordinator. And he said, okay. And I started booking venues out of my own pocket. No foreign funding, no federally registered charities supporting me. It was me and a group of my friends wanting to engage with Albertans about a very, very important topic and a heavy question. And this is the culmination of my experiences to date in my very short 6-year active political life. Realizing that at the heart of everything we're doing is education. Getting to the facts, sifting through the fluff and finding what's real. We see on the news, the state-funded media claims that I am a racist, foreign-funded actor because I believe in Alberta sovereignty. None of those things are true except for I believe in Alberta sovereignty. I've heard from a young man at an event in Edmonton that he would never support independence because the day after the referendum, Alberta will be $500 billion in debt because a separatist went to the United States and got a $500 billion loan. And I'm like, I'm thinking, wait, okay, what is this about? Okay, now I know what this is about. And I said, you know that's not true, right? People have been talking about these things, asking if it was a possibility to have a line of credit, but nobody has a loan. We haven't had a referendum. We don't have the authority. Nobody has the authority to do that. It hasn't been done. Yes, it has. I saw it on CBC. No, don't laugh. This is a real big problem. It really is. It's not. This isn't the only point that comes up in our day-to-day conversations. So it is my desire. I desire, and all patriotic Let's Talk Albertans desire, that those who disagree with us come to these things and talk to us about it. And ask me questions. I don't have all the answers. I don't have a crystal ball. I can't tell you exactly what Alberta will be, but I can tell you what it could be. I can tell you with a very high degree of certainty what will very likely happen should we not do anything. I'm very acutely aware of the trajectory of Canada, on where we're headed, and I know it's not a good place. I can answer your questions on my opinion on what I believe Alberta should be or could be. And that's what this is about. It's not about me telling you Alberta will have this currency and we will have this negotiation outcome of the federal government. I'm telling you that for the first time in Canadian history, we have the opportunity to decide these things ourselves. This is a first. You may believe, as I did up until just a few years ago, that Canada was created by a group of people like us who got in a room, wrote a constitution, and decided to self-govern. That never happened. I was led to believe that in school, and how surprised was I when I found out that Canada was created in an office over whiskey in London, England, where they drafted a piece of legislation that British Parliament passed to impose on the subjects of the Crown in Canada and tell them how they were going to be governed. Yeah. Here we have an opportunity. We have an opportunity that people have bled and died, sometimes in wars that lasted hundreds of years, to get the opportunity to have their independence, to self-govern. And you know what we have to do? We have to give up some time. We have to talk to each other. We have to sift through the fluff and get to the facts. And then we get to mosey into a room, maybe just like this, and in the privacy of a ballot box, we look at a ballot that has a single question on it. Do you agree that the province of Alberta, do you agree that Alberta should cease to be a province within Canada and become an independent state? Yes. State, nation, not United State, by the way. I wish they hadn't used the wording, but that's what the Clarity Act says. In the privacy of that ballot box, you're going to be looking at that paper. There's a yes or a no. And your answer is going to be the single most influential exercise of democratic will in this country's history. This is not this is not a small thing. It is not a light thing. This isn't an election. This isn't a politician. This has nothing to do with Danielle Smith or Donald Trump or Pierre Poilievre. This is about the will of the people for the first time in Canadian history being given the opportunity to chart our own course forward. Finally. So we're going to have a hopefully very robust Q&A. I would ask respectfully, I understand that some folks might want to debate some things. There's going to be questions asked that are going to take a lot longer to talk through than a few minutes. We got to keep it kind of short so everybody gets a chance, but we will stick around after, and we will have some more longer conversations. And moving into the next few months, I'm happy to continue these conversations. This letter here with, I don't know, maybe there's closer to 20 pages, double-sided, 10 pages double-sided, with a lot of questions that I actually find frustrating because I've answered them lots. I'm going to sit down and answer all these questions. I'm going to do that. Because this person, this Albertan, deserves the answers. And he might not like my answers, and I might not sway him to my side, but I'm going to give him my answers. I'm going to share my opinion. And we'll continue to do that. That's what Let's Talk Alberta is about. So I look forward to the Q&A. We're going to give you a chance to stretch your legs and grab I don't know if there's coffee left, but grab a water or whatever. And I see a flag waving over there. My beautiful girlfriend Jessica reminds me that we have some overpriced merch back there. And if any of you own a business, you know what being away from your business costs. It's not free, and this is how I keep food on the table. So I see a lot of blue out there already. I thank you in advance for supporting our advocacy for what we believe Alberta should be. And yeah, just make sure you buy it all so that she doesn't have to pack it up. She has a bad back and doesn't want to carry it. So if you don't buy all the things and she has to carry it, you're actually hurting her physically. So just keep that in mind. Anyway, thank you for listening to my rambling. Enjoy your 10-minute break. We'll come right back and we're going to do a Q&A. Thank you.
Cory Morgan, test 1, 2. All right, ladies and gentlemen. So thanks for tuning in. Back here on my cocoon, so to speak. No, it's just an improvised table with some equipment on top of everything. So I just moving the cameras a little bit, and that's funny because as I was setting up my equipment and the chairs, there was this guy say, "Oh, there need three because there are three speakers like Cory, Chris, and Sheane." And it was like, maybe one day you have to answer questions. Like, oh, that'd be good. Yeah, that's kind of cool. I'm gonna check if we're gonna take questions for the Q&A on the chat. If you have questions on the Q&A questions, just put it on the chat, and we're gonna try to follow up after this. Okay? So yeah. So I want to see the comments real quick, and don't forget the super chats, because this is like really important. It's the hats. Like, we have all those scanners over there. They have their merch and everything. That's my way to make money, is super chats and monetization, which is kind of cool. So, hey Shane. So yes, if you have questions on the chat, just put it on. If you have questions, just put it on the chat, and I will line up the to the guys that will have questions over there. So, and thanks for tuning in, and for the e-transfers and the super chats that came out as well, and also share this stream for all of the people. Tomorrow I'll be in Fort McLeod. There's gonna be pierogies on there. That's gonna be fantastic and yummy. Makes my mind warm and fuzzy. So, yeah, that's good. Hell, that's awesome. It's been awesome to see young people come out inside the petition log for 20 years in the Drayton Valley. That is absolutely good. That is absolutely important. Hell, Jan. Did you say pierogies? Yes, I said pierogies. So tomorrow they have an event with pierogies and stuff, and from McLeod. So that's gonna be that's gonna be the last Independence event I will be doing this week for now. So I got 5 First Nations signed up in a row yesterday. Amen, brother. And that's the thing, because I drove across the Sitka Reserve today on my way here. It was like, should I take a picture or a video of how terrible it is or not? So, I don't know. So, my question is why Fabio not standing up and calling out this horrible behavior towards canvassers? Because he doesn't care. He's an activist. And quite frankly, what happens is that, well, they're going to speak anyways, but generally speaking with Fabio, what's up? Good. Sorry, I was talking with the people and here, the poor people who are organizing this event. So, Yeah. So about Fabio. What you think you need to understand about the left is that they will absolutely do whatever they can to preventing us from doing anything. If that includes violence, they will do it. If that includes harassing people, they will do it. That's how they operate, basically. So, no, he's not going to denounce. In fact, he's gonna keep her mouth shut. Oh, I said that Fabio is a she. I don't care. But anyways, that's kind of what happens with Fabio. So, but anyways, I don't expect decency from the left. That's what I'm trying to tell. So I'm gonna switch the cameras and we're gonna get these things ready, I guess.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this is your 2-minute warning. If you would start making your way back to your seats, that would be greatly appreciated. We'll get started in about 2 minutes.
Funny, I was told by a guy here, not too far from here, you probably see it on camera, but he's basically saying, thanks for the sound, because normally the sound in this venue is quite actually awful, and the sound here is great. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. That's fantastic. That's kind of what I do, bring my sound system and have some fun, and potentially turn into a business. I don't know. Let's see what happens, but yeah, it's kind of cool. And I know that I'm feeding the sound to Chris's mixer as well. I'm just run a cable to his mixer so he can stream it as well too, which is kind of cool too. I think the show should start very quickly. So what will happen is that after the Q&A session, before the Q&A session, they're gonna play Ben Crane's songs type of thing. I had to check which one, but we'll see in a minute. Absolutely. Max, the wedding singer. Oh, the wedding singer. Oh, well, that's funny because this is like a German club. You don't see the sides of the building, but they have like older districts in Germany on the left side. You have Bremen, Stuttgart, Osnabrück, Hamburg. Oh, Hey, Shane. We're playing Alberta roots now. Any idea we can buy Alberta flags? I'll show you this right now. Canadian Tire is in our inventory actually. That's where I got my huge flag that I have in my studio at home. I got it from Canadian Tire. It's in their inventory. You can actually look for it and order them online if you wanted to. Just saying. Yeah, so it's like $20 off of Canadian Tire, you see? And I got one of those in my studio right now. And all the flags I usually carry with my equipment and everything are flags that were given to me over time. So you know. But you can definitely buy it from Canadian Tire. My strategy is perhaps buy from Canadian Tire directly because they might not have at the store. But it's definitely in their catalog. You can definitely order those things off Canadian Tire. So most likely you'll have to go in and buy them online. That's my guess. But when I got a Canadian flag, it was they have it in stock. So just saying. Yeah, exactly. So I think they're about to start soon. So I'm gonna switch the cameras and have some little fun there.
Yep. Okay, if I can get the other two gentlemen to get up here, we'll get started. But in the meantime, that song that you just listened to was My Alberta Roots by Mr. Ben Crane. He wrote that song specifically for the independence movement. So I would ask a very big favor of you. I would love if you would go to bencrane.com and download a copy of that song for $1.50. I would love to see that song start trending. So if you could do that, that would be great. I'm supposed to tell everybody that inside that room at the back there is a whole bunch of beautiful snacks and coffee and water, so go make sure that you finish it up. Mr. Scott just needs to get his butt over this way. I'm about to ask a couple of favors from you. The first thing is I've got some gentlemen that are going to be passing around the donation bins. If you can, I really appreciate if you put a little bit into there, because this is funded entirely by people like you. As Chris said, we do not get money from anybody. It's just a bunch of us going around, and that helps pay for venues and gas to get from event to event. The second favor I'm going to ask of you is if you would go to letstalkalberta.com or the Whistle Stop Cafe Facebook page and pick out posters from there for upcoming events and share them with people that you know in those areas, because the algorithm has been really messing with us. In fact, the other night I did a reminder for Edmonton, and the next day it was poof, gone. So we really rely upon word of mouth to get the word out on this. No, I didn't forget to do it. Let's see, is there anything you want to add to what I've just said?
I didn't listen to anything you said.
Of course not. So, way we're going to do the question and answer tonight. So I'll get the gentleman to start passing it around. But I will get you to go over. You can see Dan in the blue APP shirt over there. If you would line up behind him and with your questions. He is not going to give you the mic. He will hold the mic. And please keep your questions short and succinct if you can. That would be greatly appreciated.
So just to be clear, folks, when you chip in for these events, you're helping cover costs of venues, travel, those types of things. Nobody's getting rich. We drive crappy cars, and even if we don't bring in enough to cover the event, I'm still going to pay for it. So I'll just keep doing it until I can't. But so far, it's been great, and we've been able to at least meet our costs.
Good, Cory. Can you move about a foot and a half that way? I'm being told that we're not visible because of the post. Perfect. Okay.
Okay, I guess we're ready. No, I will not give you the recipe for my cinnamon buns.
Trademark.
Hi, thanks for coming. Thanks for inviting us, and especially your talk was really good.
Folks, if you can keep the noise down, I really want to hear the questions.
Okay, so you're here in Danielle Smith's riding. A couple years ago, she won this riding in a landslide. And in the election in which Danielle won this riding in a landslide, there were two separatist candidates from two different separatist parties. And between them, they got like 3% of the vote. And that worked out well for Danielle because she had the word conservative and they had the word separatist. And so nobody had to just vote separatist. They could vote for her. So now in your range of like 17%, 42% or whatever that, your polls, give you for support, it's due to Danielle, right? And so we both have a Danielle problem now, in that she is the most powerful conservative in Canada, more powerful than the entire separatist movement. And so right now, your momentum and your strength and your visibility and whatever the number is between 17 and 42 is owed to the visibility that Danielle has given you. And she is the most effective separatist leader right now, and effective in terms of moving the cause forward, giving you platform, giving you visibility. Danielle has been excellent for separatism, but she won't acknowledge you, which means she's got it in her back pocket that she can turn on you. And you know this. And you have to expect that maybe she will turn on you. So my question is about long-term vision, because if it doesn't all come together for you in October, then what? Because when Danielle turns on you, as she probably will, you won't be able to use the word conservative because she's outlawed it. And probably just about everybody in this room wants to be conservative. They say they're conservative, but they can't be conservative and separatist unless Danielle lets you.
Okay, I think I understand the question. First off, I want to point out that Danielle Smith was elected before this gained this type of momentum. I do not believe that she is the most effective advancing political force for Alberta independence. That was actually Mark Carney. That was the federal election, and I can say that with confidence because at the time Danielle Smith was campaigning and she was elected, I was the CEO of the Alberta Prosperity Project, and Cory and I were actually traveling around the province doing it was called Ambassadors for Independence tour. We were just talking to people about how to talk about Alberta independence, and the rooms were empty. I mean, how many were in Fort Mac? Like
I had 14.
14 people. It wasn't what it is now. Sure, there was sentiment. Obviously, it had really dropped quite a bit because we had some successes, right? We got rid of Jason Kenney. We elected Danielle Smith, and people had some political saviors that they were looking at. But while she was premier, this wasn't like this. We weren't filling rooms. It wasn't until the federal election. And I really believe what I've heard from Albertans, why they got off the fence and came to the side of Alberta sovereignty, was they realized that if our federal election can be called at 8:09 or 8:10, and our ballot boxes hadn't even been opened yet, that's a very telling problem. And so the independence movement was already primed. The network was there. We'd been having the conversation. The seeds were planted. So I believe it was Mark Carney that was the most effective independence leader, and he continues to be. One of the other major talking points that I hear from people is I didn't agree with Alberta independence until I watched this last floor crosser. Like, how frustrating is it for Albertans, for whatever political stripe, to know that their voices don't, it's a little feedback there, Max, to know that their voices don't carry any weight in the federal sphere. As for whether or not she backs independence or not, she's been pretty clear that, and actually in some heated arguments that people don't see, that she believes in a sovereign Alberta within a united Canada. And that's been a very contentious point for a lot of the, I would say, not leaders, but forerunners, forefront people in the independence movement, because they expect that because conservatism in Alberta has a good proportion of independence-minded Albertans, they expect that Danielle should get in front of that. Problem is, nobody's given her a mandate to do that yet. There has been no measurable metric by which she can get in front of that kind of parade, and she continues not to do so. One thing that I've watched her do that I respect is that she, for better or for worse, and she has to take the rotten tomatoes after she does it, she's trying to get government out of the way so that people can have their vote, have their voice. And I think that's what government is supposed to do. They're supposed to get out of the way so that people can speak. And I can see from the other perspective, that might seem like, oh, she is supporting this thing. But I don't believe Smith will support either a yes or a no until she knows what the size of that parade is. One of her favorite things, her favorite quotes is, it's a Ralph Klein quote. I don't create the parade, I just find it and get in front of it. And that's what she's doing. I hope that answers it. Cory, I'm sure you got something.
Yeah, I just want to go a little further, kind of to what I was talking about with the amount of energy we can dedicate between now and voting time in the referendum. And I know some people have issues with the UCP or mistrust of Premier Smith or whatnot and everything. But you know what? The time to dedicate that energy then to displacing Premier Smith or changing parties or changing government is October 20th. We got to remain laser focused on the referendum. Don't waste your energy going after the provincial government. As long as she's giving us a referendum date, that's all I'm focused on right now. As Chris said too, as people saying, oh, the day after she'll just ignore it. Well, no, she won't. Not if 60% of the Albertans get up and vote yes. She will not. I promise you that. So it's up to us. Stay focused on getting the referendum and focused on getting the yes vote. And the provincial government's important, but in the meantime, spending your battle going after her, you're just wasting precious energy that could be dedicated to winning that yes.
And that's really why the independence movement has come as far as it has, because this isn't about politicians. There's no politicians involved. They've tried to get involved, and they get all panty in a knot when they realize the people don't let them take it over. Like, there really are no politicians involved. They dip their feet in and then they run away right away because they can't control it. But Cory, for the other part of that question, do you want to maybe just talk about the idea of the parties and why we see what we do now with parties, specifically independence parties?
Well, that's something, and a shameless plug for my book. I'm sold out, actually. That's why I don't have any copies here. But the Sovereigntist Handbook, you can get it on Amazon. One of the points I make is I formed an independence party in the end of the 90s. I thought that was the path to get there at that time. That's how Quebec moved ahead. That's how they got things together. It failed catastrophically. Thankfully, we've had probably 7 or 8 other independence parties form and fail to show it wasn't just me, we were all failures. So I wasn't alone with it. But the party system, we are different than Quebec. It just doesn't work here. A party brings a whole bunch of complexity to it. A party brings an internal structure of conflict. It brings having to win 87 little races rather than focusing on one yes vote. It deals with constituency associations, a party constitution, so many other aspects that distract us from the independence part. That's the piece of the formula that's been missing all the way up until now. We've spun our wheels with these parties over and over and over again and gotten nowhere with them. This time, it's a grassroots thing that, as Chris said, there's no politicians in it. It's just a movement. And that's kept it, ironically, together. Some of us bicker with each other within the movement and everything, but it's not like a party where we have to rip things apart. We just do our separate meetings and carry on with it. So the party system is there. Parties are important, but as far as Alberta independence goes, independence parties just are not a factor that work for us right now.
And one more thing about political parties in general. What we've seen over the last 30 years or so is a shift to a fear of vote splitting. We've shifted to almost like a binary system, federally or provincially. And the reason is, I think they know that people are fearful of the other thing, so they'll support something and maybe sacrifice some principles for it. So we saw the Reform Party was like a political revival, right? It was huge. I still can't even believe that even happened, that it went from 0 to 100 just like that. Then they were fearful that they would lose, so they joined with another party and joined with another party, and they conglomerated. So now there was no choice anymore. And the same thing happened in Alberta. We had the Wild Rose, and we had the NDP, and we had the Progressive Conservative Party. And the Wild Rose, under the leadership of Danielle Smith, was so worried about the NDP winning, they sacrificed their principles and joined the other party and took away the choice. So what we've seen is a shift, and now people are so scared of the other, they won't support anything other than the sure win. It's like, I have to vote this way because the alternative is terrible. No, it doesn't matter that my values align more with this party. It doesn't matter that I'm an independence. And you know what? I voted UCP, and I'm an independence-minded Albertan. Not because I don't believe in the values of the Independence Party, but because I don't believe that that's a plausible vehicle to achieve what we're looking for. And that's become painfully obvious. 2%, 3%, right? It's just not working. So what Cory says, if it's not working, why would we continue to do that? There's another mechanism. There's the will of the people. And that's what we're focusing on now. Did we miss anything? You're welcome.
Maybe, could you just say a little stuff?
The lineup.
All right, hello. I have some notes, so I have a three-part situation. So there's a few things that I don't feel have been answered. One's about the Clarity Act. It exists, and Ottawa can still say no, even if you win the referendum. Also, you mentioned the 40%. The stats I've heard are 70% of Albertans don't agree with separation right now. So that's just what I heard. There's 48 First Nations in Alberta, and they all have treaties with the Crown, and not with you. So what happens when, oh my God, I'm nervous, right? When they choose to stay with Canada? Do you negotiate with them, or do you draw borders through their land? And then there's the United States issue. Your movement's representatives from the Alberta Prosperity Party met with Trump officials 3 times last year, in April, September, and December. They asked for a $500 billion credit line those times. The Treasury Secretary called Alberta a natural partner for the US, meanwhile, a network of 20 fake YouTube channels using AI avatars and deepfakes have pushed separatist content for nearly 40 million views. One of their voice actors has even slipped and used like Atlanta Prosperity Project, so it's like clearly fake. So this is just like recent news. So that's the thing. So it's just alluding that there is foreign interference with the separatist movement. They want Alberta's resources. They're running out of fresh water due to all the data stuff, all that kind of stuff, okay? Yeah, so after all that.
Max, sorry, can we take these? We'll just do them one at a time because we're never going to remember it all. So let's go with the first one, and we'll talk on that and then move on. Okay, so
yeah, sorry. So the lady asked about the money, the last part. That was the $500 billion loan ask that just keeps coming up in places, and I know that there has been disputes, but she just wants it addressed again. The previous part was the indigenous communities and how is that navigated. So that's the two.
Those first here. Yeah.
Okay, I think the first one was about the Clarity Act, which, as I said at the start, it lays out the pathwork to independence, but it's not an easy one. It doesn't give Canada permission to say no. It does say a negotiation in good faith has to begin, and that doesn't guarantee a negotiation leads to independence. No, it could lead to a stalemate. And when it comes to the number, the most unclear part of the Clarity Act is how many votes are needed. It says a clear majority, and a lot of people are debating what that means. A simple majority is 50% plus 1. It says clear majority, so I'm going to assume it's higher than that is what's required. I've talked about that, and people have debated with me on that, saying 50% plus 1's enough. Well, I tell you what, it's not. If we want to keep it mired in the courts forever, in 10 years of fighting and back and forth, we can get 51, 52% in the vote. It would be a tragedy for the independence movement. We got to shoot for 55 to 60. That's just my view. I know some others can debate that. But either way, the stronger the mandate we get, the stronger the negotiations will be. The harder time that the federal government can say that this isn't reflecting Albertans when it comes to that. The reference case for the Clarity Act that came out in 1998 said there isn't a mechanism for a unilateral declaration of independence for a province. But it also basically said there's also nothing to stop it if that happens. If it comes to a negotiation stalemate, if the federal government is negotiating in bad faith, or if Alberta is, it could fall apart, and then a declaration could happen. That's a path we're going to assume we can navigate our way through the Clarity Act first. That's priority one, and trying to work within the rules we have. The Indigenous treaties. That is an area we can't hold a referendum to say that we're going to extinguish the treaties or get rid of them. That would be violating Section 35. It'd be violating the spirit of writing those agreements in the first place. But we also have to remember that 97.3% of Alberta's land mass is permanently ceded. 1.3% is the reserves, and that's clear in the treaties. That's exactly what they are. Though the people living on those reserves could choose not to become part of it, as you said, and they would stay within Canada, and it's going to be a complicated situation. We would have to deal with it. It might lead to partition. Keith Wilson is a lawyer who speaks very well on constitutional issues on the number of things that could potentially happen. Most of what I'd like to see is just as much participation from the citizens. They're Albertans like everybody else on the reserves, and because the system's not serving them well either. And we could work towards things like that, but it's not necessarily a deal breaker. As for the guys going down to the States, there's a couple of things. They could do whatever they want. That's the thing with this decentralized movement, and that's one of the dangers of it, because kind of nobody speaks for it as a whole, but everybody speaks for it as a whole. So when they've gone down there and it's been portrayed as representative of saying the movement's trying to play footsies with Trump or negotiating a bizarre $500 billion line of credit, which hasn't happened and won't happen. But these things need to be quelled. They're rumors. They aren't helping ourselves by going down there and not being clear on these things. It was one of the senior members of the Prosperity Project who went down there. But I mean, again, the Prosperity Project's been a proponent in this thing, but they don't speak for the whole movement. We got to remember, Quebec went and met in Paris before their referendums with the French, and they met with the Americans as well. Part of smart diplomacy is at least building relationships with your neighbors in advance. Doesn't mean you're necessarily selling out the resources. I don't know what their conversations were. As for talking, some people saying we become independent and they'll just come up and take our water and our oil and all of that stuff. The question I keep throwing out is what's stopping them now? There's been no, aside from Trump, who is Trump, if you're looking for a guy who's a Trump fan up here, I know I've had some fights with other people, I've never been one. But he does his thing. And his 51st state stuff has been very damaging, I think, for the independence movement and just in relations in general. But either way, aside from his musings, there's no real appetite for annexation of Alberta in the United States. It's not there. He can go on about what he goes on about, but they're starting to call him the taco because he goes all over the place with things. They're valid concerns, but they aren't representative of the movement. Now, the final one I'll leave off, that recent news with all of those spoofed websites. I was actually on Sheila Gunn Reid's show today discussing that. We dug into it and tried to figure out the main motivation on why that'd be happening, because it sounds like it's a foreign player running it, like it might not even be American. It might be somebody in Europe or Russia or down south. And again, none of those sites are actually doing the independence movement any favors. Polling within the independence movement shows there's not much appetite for that 51st state thing, so it only hurts us. But they've gotten over 40 million hits on those AI-generated sites. Some of that motivation could simply be somebody unprincipled but very smart realized they got a hot-button issue that's generating 40 million hits, and I don't know what that translates into in money, but they're making some good bucks out of that thing. But it's not part of a wider conspiracy within the independence movement. If it is, it's not been a productive one for us. It's not anything that's helping people vote yes. So I'm kind of glad it was exposed, and all I would say to everybody else is always watch your information sources. I say it over and over again, we're in this beautiful age where you could pick up your phone and you got more access to information than we've ever had in any time in human history, but we've also got more access to bullshit than we've ever had in human history. So we've got to double check everything we hear and see on there and don't take it at face value. So it's worth asking those questions.
So I'll quickly comment on the Clarity Act and the loan thing. Like I think you asked, but weren't you the CEO of the APP? I was. At the time they did those trips, I wasn't. So I can't comment on how anything like that went. But what I can say is, like, these are not elected representatives. We're not independent. So there's really nothing to talk about except for, is it possible that this could happen someday? Oh, maybe yes, maybe no, whatever. Really has no bearing on anything. And it will be, for that to happen, for Alberta to seek credit from a foreign nation, they would have to be first a government to do it. We would have to be independent already. We would have to have our constitutional convention, which outlined how our government is going to be, what our monetary policy was going to be. There's so many things that have to happen before that. The idea that somebody could just go down and do it is completely. I know the CBC has mentioned it lots, and I feel like sometimes we see things repeated so many times by trusted outlets that it becomes real, but it just isn't. It hasn't happened. The Clarity Act, here's an interesting thing. There's this misconception that the Clarity Act is the be-all and end-all of sovereignty for Alberta. That is just simply not true. The Clarity Act is Canada's preferential way in which a province would seek sovereignty. Preferential. Under the Constitution. Now, in independent Alberta, a sovereign Alberta would be rejecting the Constitution. We would want our own. That's kind of what sovereignty means. It means that we would do it ourselves. So when you consider Alberta seeking sovereignty, it's not that we would be asking Canada for permission. There's actually only two things that are needed for a region to become sovereign. And sometimes it's easier than others. That's the will of the people through democratic means, like a referendum or something like that, with a clear majority. And I don't mean 50% plus one. I mean a clear, like 60% and up is clear. And there's two reasons for that. Number one, because it demonstrates the will of the people internally with the country or nation or sovereign area that region wishes to leave. It demonstrates. The second one is it demonstrates to the international community the will of the people. So in the end, it's actually the international community that recognizes the will of the people, just as Canada did with Kosovo, just as other countries did with Ireland and Norway and Sweden and all sorts of other nations that have broken from their parent nation. So the Clarity Act, I hear all the time, well, what if Canada says no? Well, I don't care, we're not asking. Well, what if the other provinces don't agree? Well, I don't care, we're not asking. Alberta does not wish, I do not wish Alberta to be caged within the current framework. If I was okay with being in the Constitution, I wouldn't be independence-minded Albertan. So I hope that kind of clears that part up, or maybe it made it less clear. But there was actually something else in there that you mentioned I don't think we touched on. I think there was...
No, I think we had it all. I have some responses, but it's fine. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, this is Potato. Potato's been a very good girl. So my question is about monetary policy. I'm looking for thought leadership in the movement where I can get more information on how to maintain economic sovereignty in an export-driven economy while keeping a Canadian dollar. Because while, yes, they negotiate, they don't, they agree, they don't. If we are keeping a Canadian dollar, it is really simple for them, if we are an export-driven economy, to simply raise interest rates so high, appreciate the currency, and price us out of any market. So I don't see how that can work, and I'm wondering, is the idea of maintaining the Canadian dollar something that we're keeping on the plate to deal with people's worries about the economic future and any crises or crash that might come as a result?
Okay, so I did expect this question because you mentioned that you're a professor of macroeconomics. So you teacher of okay, so you know what you're talking about. I'm a burger flipper. I work at a restaurant. I was a roughneck. I worked in the energy industry. Spent money like it was never going to end. However, I've been forced to actually learn about some of these things. In your classes, have you ever talked about how many nations around the globe use the US dollar as their primary reserve?
Well, that's all about oil prices, but yeah.
Okay, so I think it's 3. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's 3 nations use the US dollar as their primary reserve.
I couldn't agree or disagree on that. I know that in terms of buying and selling oil on the market, it is priced in US dollars, but is not always transacted in US dollars. It's more that's their unit of accounting.
Right. Okay. So what I'm talking about, it's their literal currency. It's what they use day to day. There's also 28 nations on Earth that recognize and accept U.S. currency just normally. My opinion, and again, this is just my opinion because cart before the horse here. The way it would go is, referendum, successful, constitutional convention, choose our source, choose our government, what our monetary policy is going to be, what currency we're going to be, stuff like that, and then we Albertans decide. What I would advocate for is immediately, I would not want to use the Canadian dollar. Why? Because Alberta is 15% of Canada's GDP. Alberta's GDP is over 70% new value creation, like resource-driven, creating things for export, like basically creating value, right? That's a big chunk of the Canadian economy, very big. So I don't see good things happening with the Canadian dollar, and some economists agree, some economists don't. This is just my personal opinion. And what I would like to see is immediately adopt the US dollar, but only for a time, because a sovereign nation doesn't use somebody else's currency. We would have to have our own currency. One question I ask people when they ask about currency is, if you have an issue with Canada's monetary policy right now, if you take exception with us printing 100% more money and devaluing it to the point where we're paying what we are right now with the massive inflation over the last 15 years, what will you do about it as an Albertan? And the answer is really nothing. We can't do anything to affect how our monetary policy is within Canada because our voice is too small. So that's, to be fair, that's the first thing I look at. In an independent Alberta, we would have to have an Alberta dollar. What it looks like, I don't know, whose picture's on it, whatever, maybe it's going to be potato. But I learned something interesting. You know how the Asian financial crisis played out? Okay.
I lived there during the Asian crisis, actually.
I met with a guy named Martin. He was born in Hong Kong, and he was so, he just had to tell me these things because he was so worried. He said, you got to listen to my story about what happened in the Asian countries. They had their dollars pegged to the US dollar. It wasn't backed by hard assets. Predatory investment happened. They crashed everything, and it was just a disaster. The only one that survived was Hong Kong. I said, well, why did Hong Kong survive? And he said, because Hong Kong has 105% of their GDP in reserve, hard assets, hard reserves. He said, when Alberta is independent, and he's an independence-minded Albertan, but he's forward-thinking, if we don't make sure that our, whatever it is, Alberta dollar is backed with reserves, we will be vulnerable to predatory investments that could do the same thing. They could wipe us out, so we have to do it. You can't do that right off the bat. That's going to be something we're going to have to work up to that, right? So we adopt the US dollar. We can trade internationally. It's mostly stable. It's easy to trade with our largest trading partner. 88% of our trade is south anyway. And we can just do it day one. But we have to build an Alberta dollar, build an Alberta reserve. That's my personal opinion for monetary policy. And I am more than happy to have people smarter than me weigh in and say, maybe we should do something different. Maybe we should use... I know there's a lot of people in Ottawa that want to use the Chinese currency because Chinese everything, elections and stuff. Sorry, I can't help myself, folks. But yes, so when you ask who would you talk to about these things, Dennis Kalma, he's great. My friend Tanner today, young man but very astute with things like this, and my new friend born in Hong Kong, Martin, who shared the information about the Asian financial crisis with me. And by the way, folks, if you want to look this stuff up or fact check it and then send me some criticisms or critique or whatever, you can find this stuff, Whistle Stop Cafe, whistlestoptruckstop.ca/blog. Got a whole bunch of blogs there. Lots of them deal with Alberta independence, and I've compiled these questions and my answers as best I can in easy to read, easy digestible format on the website.
All right, thank you. I'm looking forward to more and more nerdy, really boring conversations about monetary policy.
That's my favorite.
Mine's going to be very short. So considering Alberta has grown since 1965, since we adopted the maple leaf flag, significantly about 25 to 30%, so 1.4 million, give or take, Albertans have moved here either internally or from elsewhere, like myself. What in policy has to include that, kind of thinking down the line? How do people who are contributing members, building community, engaging, supports, whether it's for local people, Santa Claus's funds, all the good things. How do they get to be a part of that, and what parts of policy address that in the plan?
Where are you from?
Born in USSR, raised in Israel.
Oh, cool. So, landed immigrant, permanent resident, citizen. Well,
My
because
status
it affects the
is going to be
question.
printed on my driver's license, thanks to our premier soon. I can show you that then.
No. The reason I'm asking is because I think what you're asking is it's an immigration question. It's an immigration policy question, right? So what I'm understanding is you're wondering about people who are here without Canadian citizenship. How would Alberta deal with them? Well, they would apply for citizenship. That's what it would be, right? They would apply for citizenship or apply for the same type of temporary citizenship or whatever, or temporary resident status they have right now. There is no way in hell that I would ever advocate for or even allow a conversation to happen that says we're getting rid of everyone who's not a citizen. That's complete crap. Like the people that are here right now, why would we want to disrupt their lives like that? If they want to live and contribute to the most free, prosperous, highest GDP nation on earth, I want them here, 100%. And in no situation would I agree with just randomly kicking people out. I would go through the process and maybe make sure nobody's an axe murderer, and go from there.
Follow a little further. Last night in Calgary, a young gentleman of Indian descent came up to talk to me for a little while. And he's a Canadian citizen, but only recently got his citizenship. He was born in India, immigrated here, and he said there are concerns within the Indian community. He's a strong independence proponent, but he's hearing from others because a lot of them have family members who have recently immigrated or recently come in. They're permanent residents or even perhaps not even up to that status yet. And we do hear some voices now and then calling for things like mass deportation of everybody who doesn't have a citizenship. That's one of the dangers of the internet, because anybody can get up and say something like that or make that noise that gets around. But I think nobody serious within the movement is making that kind of call. Aside from the poor morality of the whole concept, it would be an economic catastrophe. We've got to remember, these are some of our most productive Albertans. They really are. Now, talking about illegal immigrants is a whole different story altogether. Some of the people who have abused student visas or snuck in or came in under false pretenses, that's a different conversation altogether. But we as a movement do have to watch a bit of our xenophobia and remind ourselves many of our best Albertans weren't born in Alberta. And Rachel Notley was born in Alberta. So it's a valid thing about our messaging and how we got to think about things broadly, though. If we want to build a nation that's going to be prosperous and free, it means we include everybody who's here now.
Just so you know, I hope you didn't take offense to me asking. I'm not trying to pry. Like it makes no difference to me what your citizenship status is here. As a matter of fact, I'm interested to know about your time in the USSR because we could be cousins.
For the time in Israel, we could be.
My name's Ken Moen, and I just arrived back from the States, and the confusion that I have and the questions that I get asked often is the difference between independence and separation.
The difference between independence and separation? Well, what Alberta is looking for is sovereignty, actually. Sovereignty. Independence is a tool by which we gain sovereignty. We can become sovereign. I'm pursuing sovereignty, meaning that Albertans decide what governs Alberta and how their lives are affected by that governance, period. Separation, I think that it's a word used in a negative context to describe the movement. It's a negative sounding word. When I was a kid and Quebec was doing their thing, we called them dirty separatists, right? But yeah, Alberta we're not separating from anything. Like we're physically attached at the seams. So that's the difference.
LeVar Payne. Chris, my grandfather was Russian, came here through the U.S. to Canada, so we might be cousins fourth or fifth time removed, I don't know.
It's awesome.
Anyway, we have seen over the years, election after election, 8 o'clock at night, it's done in Alberta. So there's a number of things, and that's one of them that causes me to be independence-minded. There's a whole pile more. C-48, C-69, C2, C8, C9, C15, C293. All of those things are determined to make sure that Canada becomes a dictatorship under Carney. And if anybody has a look at his book, you can actually see where he's moving in that direction.
You know, I actually am reading his book. I'm probably about 5/8 of the way through.
Last night on CBC television, The National, there was a report actually about the independence or sovereignty movement here in Alberta. And could you just hold us a little farther away? I think I can. And they were very dismissive. I guess I'm asking Cory this question. How can we kind of improve what the CBC is doing? Do we have an opinion on it? Like, I know they're funded by the government. They don't want us to be thriving. But is there a thought you have on how we can counter that?
Well, the CBC is a sick, broken institution. We can't improve it. It's only going to get worse. It's one of the most parasitic organizations of the Federation that's existing right now. I mean, it's purely dependent on tax dollars to put out its biased messaging. And part of its mandate, though, its real mandate, even from the 80s and 90s, was to promote unity. They were supposed to be the voice speaking against Quebec independence as well, as far as the actual, any open bias, they were supposed to be there. They're supposed to be a unifying force. They're never going to be a friend of the independence movement. The way we can't fix it, but we can defang it. And part of how we do that is here tonight. This is how we bypass legacy media and misinformation from those older institutions, is getting face-to-face with people. They can't get here. They can't block a website. They can't stop a voice. They can't do anything when it's us talking person to person. So whether it's at meetings like this, whether it's door knocking, whether it's at other events, we bypass the legacy media. And then there are other outlets, Western Standard, for example, suggest taking out a subscription perhaps, or Epoch Times. There's some columnist there who writes some great stuff too. But we have alternatives, and we just have to shift people towards it. There's still some stalwarts who watch the CBC. I read an interesting survey on that actually recently, and it was quite interesting because we're seeing young people moving more towards conservatism in Canada, and we saw the older people go on, many of them, to the elbows up bunch. And the trend, though, no young people watch the CBC or CTV or any of the old ones. And the last few people who still watch the CBC, the average viewer of CBC News is pretty long in the tooth. And I'm not saying to be insulting to a few older folks. There's a couple here who are past 50. But that's where that demographic's shifting. So I think the CBC is dying on its own. And we just have to keep working outside of it and don't give it the credibility that it used to have.
Do you know that there is actually a law in the books that says that it's illegal for the media to lie? It is. Ask Chris. He fact-checked me on it. It actually, there is a law. It was repealed finally by the Liberals.
Little Potato.
Yeah, Little Potato repealed it. But until he repealed it, there was a law in the books that said that media could not lie. So if you could prove that they were lying, you could go after them. But when Trudeau decided to give them a whole bunch of money, before he did that, he repealed the law that made him be honest. So that's just an interesting thing for your information.
And I think it was Bill C-39, if I believe correctly, right?
I think that's what it was that repealed it. I'm not sure. I think that's the bill number that repealed it, yeah.
Yep. Hi, my name's Wayne. First off, I want to just, without getting an answer, put a question to the audience. Keep this in your mind. How much overreach are you folks willing to keep putting up with? Now I'm going to give a statement. 3 times in my lifetime, I've had this federal government go ahead and completely wipe me out financially. Close bank accounts without any due process, without any notification to me. And further to this, the direction that has already been commented on about the various bills, this is nothing less but an ushering in of tyranny. My question to the people on the stage, my understanding is that there is allegedly from APP or wherever, I want to know if you have any awareness of this, a Bill of Rights that is being worked on. And the second part is, if so, do you know if and when it might be revealed to the people like that value of freedom document?
I'm going to let Lamar answer that one.
Of our pain, actually.
Thanks, Chris. Good question. So there is a group of guys, you may have heard of them, they were called the Black Hats. Very good bunch of guys who, in fact, put together a package of 22 rights and freedoms, working with the Premier and some of the MLAs. And we brought it forward to the Premier and gave it to her as a suggestion, not necessarily that she had put them in exactly as they were written. And at that point, the Premier and her cabinet and her MLAs decided to put forward some changes to the existing Bill of Rights. And this group, in fact, met with people all over the province, including the UCP provincial board, presented these items. And finally, in Red Deer at the AGM, two people got up and presented this 22 Bill of Rights, and there was discussion back and forth on it. And a vote was taken, and I believe it was around 90% of the 6,000 people that were there voted for it. And nothing really happened with it. The Premier didn't take those, or her cabinet, or her caucus didn't take those and put them in. She sprinkled a couple of little pieces into the new Bill of Rights, but not the ones that really protect the whole province and every Albertan. Thanks.
So just to add to that, I'm supportive of Premier Smith. I'm supportive of our government mostly, but this is one area in which I was heavily criticizing them. And it's because in our new Alberta Bill of Rights, they slipped in a kind of Section 1 type thing. Basically, you have these rights unless demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society. You know, the section that they use to strip you of your rights. I was absolutely livid to find that. And I was very critical of them. I spent almost 2 weeks trying to reconcile what government needed and what the people wanted. What the government needed was ways in which they could give us a Bill of Rights, and that's hard to even say, affirm rights that we already have via a piece of paper, while still being able to pass legislation that we asked for. For example, one piece of legislation that was asked for was the Compassionate Intervention Act, right? We wanted a legal mechanism by which if our sons or daughters or mom or dad or loved one were in a situation, in addiction or mental health crisis that they could not recover from, that there was a way to get them help they needed. We wanted that. But in the Bill of Rights, there was a right to bodily autonomy, medical choice. So how do you reconcile the two? So I spent a lot of time and a lot of effort, and I wrote a very, very long and robust essay as a burger flipper. Of course, leaning on my lawyer friends and leaning heavily on the internet and using AI to debate back and forth. And I presented that to them. I said, look, if you want to do these things, this is how you can do it. And it was crickets. And we got this watered down version of what should have been the greatest document that Albertans have ever seen, short of a Declaration of Independence. So, you know, for all of my, cheering for my UCP government, and some of them are my friends, this was one case in which I was very critical, like very vocal, opposed. And you can find that, by the way. I've got that. That's on the internet. You can read what I wrote, the whole thing.
Hi. You talked earlier, and I've heard this I don't know how many times, is that every province has the right to all of their resources and what they do with it and their economic independence. And yet, federal government keeps kiboshed everything we do. How is that possible if it is the law or the whatever that says that we have that right, and how come we don't have that right?
Well, that's the federal provincial jurisdictional battle that's been ongoing from the start, and they work around it. You notice the federal government didn't come in and take Alberta's oil, but they put massive export tariffs on it and forced us to sell it domestically at a reduced price. But it was still technically Alberta's oil. They find ways to abuse our ability to get it to market. It's still Alberta's oil, but the federal government can create those choke points so we can't get it out of the province, or at least not in a realistic timeline. Another way they dealt with things when energy companies did what they didn't believe they would do with the National Energy Program, they up and left. They said, well, it's so easy, we'll just form Petro-Canada and that'll fix it. Petro-Canada lost money every year all the way until it was finally privatized. Only government can lose money on an oil company in Alberta, but they managed. But at the same time, that technically didn't violate our natural resource ownership. The bottom line is, it keeps coming back to that same thing. If we want to end this, we have to become independent, nothing else. It's just going to be an endless battle of them finding ways to bypass our own rights.
Okay, we have a few online questions. I'll get Max to ask them, and then we'll answer them.
Okay, so question number one is basically about the people who are getting benefits from the government, such as EI, child care benefits, and all those things. What do you think is going to happen after Alberta declares independent? Do you think that, or do you expect that those monies coming from Ottawa will be affected in such a way that will be detrimental for the people in Alberta?
Well, the first thing to remember is that money that comes from Ottawa first came from Alberta. Alberta does not cut a check and send it to Ottawa. Ottawa collects taxes on our behalf, both provincial and federal, and GST, of course. The only thing they don't collect is Alberta corporate tax. So they collect all the taxes, they have it, and then they send us money back in the form of transfers. So whatever the federal government is currently sending us originated here. We are a net contributor to Confederation to the tune of between $20 and $30 billion a year, depending on what you're looking at and depending on the year. So somewhere around there, but tens of billions. So that's the first thing. Regarding the specific policy arrangements for things like EI, Alberta should already be doing it. We have a constitutional jurisdiction to manage our own unemployment insurance. We should be doing it. We over-contribute $1 billion a year. Same with the Canada Pension Plan. We over-contribute $3 billion a year. We should be doing it ourselves. At the very least, if we're doing it ourselves and we don't like how, okay, let me back this up, I'll rephrase it. If you don't like how the Canada Pension Plan is managed, what you get for benefits, what your contributions are, how do you change it?
Yeah, because one of the problems that I'm hearing on the base is that there are some folks that refuse to, should I say, support the referendum or sign the petition simply because they don't know what's going to happen because they're on benefits,
right,
like on things like that, you know?
I'm getting to it. Right now, if you don't like how your federally managed entitlements or programs are managed, there's nothing you can do about it as an Albertan. Not effectively. We can't vote our way to change with any of those things. If we bring it back to Alberta, we can. Now, here's another very specific thing that I advocate for. When Alberta transfers certain programs from a provincial jurisdiction to a national program, right? It's an Alberta national program now. There will be some, it's not going to be perfect. There will be hiccups. Anybody who's receiving something right now cannot, and if I have anything to do with it, will not be left behind. If you're getting a federal entitlement, and that entitlement ends when Alberta becomes independent, Alberta must pick up the tab. There is no question about that. You couldn't, from a moral standpoint, you couldn't say, we want to change the jurisdiction of Alberta, and we're just going to leave all these people behind. No, that's not how it works. We implement what we can at the time. Alberta Employment Insurance, Alberta Pension Plan, Alberta Old Age Security, Alberta Child Tax Benefit, whatever. If we don't implement it right away, it doesn't matter, we still pay it. We have to cover it. So nobody gets left behind.
And I think I'm going to take a final question for the online audience. This is a very fun one. That's when I watched this, I was kind of giggling. This is from Derek from Unacceptable French, who was watching on my YouTube channel. So if you want to say hello to Derek, that's fine. Yes, so got some viewers, good, awesome. He was saying, and a lady around here, she was talking about this possibility that people like myself, Chris Scott, Unacceptable French, and many others are considered AI slop. So what do you think is going to happen once Alberta becomes independent? What do you think, or what do you expect, or what do you think is going to be the reaction? Just like a fun question.
Reaction for what?
From the from Alberta, basically. It's like
you mean so they're calling me AI?
And myself AI. Do I like AI to you?
Well, I gotta ask folks. If someone was going to create an AI avatar supporting Alberta sovereignty, would they really make them look like me? Like, seriously, come on. Or me. Or Sheane, you know, well, I mean, Cory.
Well, I've had other shortcomings.
This is exactly why we're doing these meetings. So that the people that have questions can actually shake our hands, meet us, and look us in the eye. It's way too easy on the internet to have a conversation go off the rails, right? Because there's no human connection there. That's why we're doing Let's Talk Alberta, because we want to get in rooms with Albertans, whoever will come here, and have the conversations with them. And then, I mean, you can tell that I'm not AI, although I suppose I could be a Tesla robot with a really poor costume. But
well, yeah, it's funny. It came up today. I was on Sheila's show, and that this subject was up because of the AI stuff and things. And I like the way Sheila put it. It says, well, we've both been seen in the wild before, so people know that you and I are real. But that kind of comes back to it, getting out to these things face to face. It's crazy how this world is and how good that stuff is getting, that if all you've seen of a person is on a digital form, a fake person can be created. Maybe that's already happened. But you can be pretty confident that the ones that are showing up at these meetings are real. The tech hasn't gotten that far yet. And that's the way to defeat it. One-on-one, person to person, in the same room.
Does anybody have a question? Dan's going to pass the mic. I think there's one here on your left.
Sorry, it's just got to be a certain distance from my mouth or I get nervous. Okay, this one's more for everyone in the room, more than the people up on stage, but just by round of applause, who believes in one person, one vote? Follow-up question, that was about half the room applauded. And you guys are tired of being outvoted 9-1 by the rest of the country? You can't believe both things at once, just saying. Thanks.
What's the question?
I think he's saying like it or lump it in the federal system, we were outvoted.
and that's the point. You know, I am as an Albertan, I'm tired of that. And I would much rather live within a structure where we could vote and change the things that affect us locally. It's an age-old concept.
Yeah, just to get to that whole thing and why there's a problem in Canada, why it's failing. Chris talked about a lot of that earlier. You know, we've got a country, look at the geographic size of this country. And anybody who thinks that we're culturally the same from coast to coast has obviously never traveled. I mean, Newfoundlanders are from another planet. And we need a system that allows for that variance, and it's not allowing for it. And that's what's causing the conflict and the clashes. I like to bring up as an example anyways when we talk about systems, there's a landlocked country, which is a much smaller than Alberta, and it has 4 official languages. It's surrounded by different countries, and they've got a very minimalist federal government, but they got 26 little independent cantons within it. And it's Switzerland. And you know, a centralist authoritarian person would think that country should have exploded into 4 different separatist movements and would have gone and joined Italy and Germany and France and the rest that are bounding. Instead, it's one of the most secure, stable nations on the planet. And some of those cantons are radically different from the north end of Switzerland to the south because they're allowed to be with those local cultures, those local languages, those local differences. And if we can decentralize to allow for that, because different parts of Alberta have different interests in rural and urban, we need a system that addresses that. And it's important that we keep that in mind when we're talking about a new system to bring in, because if we bring in another centralized system, we're just going to make a smaller version of what we just got out of. So it is a good question. You know, we can accept that 9-1 and the rest of the country is just going to outvote us and we just suck it up. Or we get the hell out but we make sure we have a system where nobody else has to make that kind of decision again.
Speaking of Newfoundland, if Newfoundland can join Confederation with 52%, why can't we leave with 52%? Just asking for a friend. Yeah, you're my friend. All right, well, there's more questions. Okay, let's keep going.
I wrote a list of, don't hold that too close. I wrote a list.
Well, he has to hold it fairly close,
Right.
otherwise we can't hear you.
I wrote a list of some questions before I came tonight. You've answered some of them, but I have one or two that I just need some clarification on. I want to know why I'm coming up against so many Alberta separation groups. You're not amalgamated. Why is this?
We're doing different things. So there's a group right now involved in actively canvassing for petitions to support a referendum. We're not doing that. There's a group that's associated with some of those people that run education meetings and educational campaigns. They went on pause for the duration of the referendum petition collection. This meeting here, this is me and my friends going to different towns across Alberta advocating for what we believe in. That's it. There's lots of groups that are doing lots of good things. We have slightly different ways of doing it, but I think it's really important that all these groups do what they need to do, right? We don't all have to be united under the same umbrella. We're going to the same destination, but we're just getting there a little bit different way.
Okay, thanks for that answer, but I'm concerned that if there's all these different groups, if you amalgamated, we'd have a bit more power.
What you're saying is to create a political party, to be honest. I know that's not what you mean to say, but that's kind of what would happen. The good thing with having multiple groups is we're all pursuing the same goal. So you can be a member of multiple groups if you like, or not be a member of one and be a member of another. It's just that when you say that we all have to work together, that's what a political party will always say, because they're naturally adversarial, and they say there's no room for others in the room. We have to be this one or this one. So that diversity of groups is our strength. It's not dividing us. We're not fighting with each other like parties would or doing those things. We're all working towards a yes vote. So I don't see the need to amalgamate because they're each serving roles, as Chris said.
Well, I'm looking at it from the point of view is I don't want governments like they are now. I want a round table where everybody from those groups sits around the table. Everybody has the talking stick and says what they think, and then you vote on it. I don't want to see political parties because it's the worst thing that's happened. I know, I lived in England, I was born during the war, I know what's going on. And if we carry on with political groups, we've had it. We're finished.
Well, that's one of the good things about the way we are. We are decentralized. We all work together. We're all friends. I'm members of the other groups as well. We're all centralized, but it does two things. First off, it creates where there are actually no leaders, and that's been one of our strongest points in the independence movement is that we have no direct leaders. We are all grassroots. The second thing is, by having so many diversified voices and so many diversified groups, it creates a condition of whack-a-mole. So if you're all centralized under one umbrella, it's a lot easier for the opposition to take you down. But if they take down one person from one group, they're not going to take us all down. And it creates a whack-a-mole. You're all over, you're all doing something in a different way so that contributing to the same final goal.
That makes sense to me.
I just have one quick comment. I'm going to guess that you were born probably around early 70s. Yeah, I did it. I just want to let you know, my father was born in London, so we might also be cousins.
Your father would probably be younger than me.
Maybe. He was born in 1949.
Born in 43.
Well, we could be cousins.
Yeah. So I have a couple more. Just you covered the age side of things. I'm a bit concerned about what happens with investments we've got in the banks. I have a bank now that's from down east, because that's the way it's moved. What happens there? My money's in that bank down east. Is it still my money?
I know you'll probably say more, but one of the easiest things to transfer is money. I've got an American bank account. I can keep money down there. Toronto Dominion launders money down in the United States all the time. I wish I was joking. But it's a valid concern, and banks operate over international borders all the time. Your assets within them will still be your assets, even post-independence. I mean, I'm a strong supporter of bringing what you can investment-wise into Alberta, institutions like Bow Valley Credit Union or some of the others. But your bigger risk, I think, is the value of the Canadian dollars your investments may be in, and I'm not skilled enough as a financial advisor to offer things on that. But your money is still your money no matter where the bank is based when that time comes and push comes to shove. They can't take that from you.
If you have a mortgage somewhere else in some other province, that's not a problem.
Well, again, that's between you and the bank, and contract law allows for those sorts of things over international borders all the time. There are things we will have to draft regulations for, and they're valid concerns, but it's been done many times before, and we can certainly replicate it to make sure on both sides. There's people living outside of Alberta who have mortgages or properties within Alberta too, and we will have to sort that out, but it can be done.
The best people to talk to about those things, folks, is whoever is your bank. Like, talk to your banker, talk to your mortgage holder, ask them those questions, because nobody can give you the right answers here. It's going to be them. But I would like to offer this one piece of entertainment purposes only advice. If you have investments, you should know that prior planning prevents poor performance, right? If you have investments, you should be forward thinking and doing your best to think about what's going to happen in the future to affect your investments. If you determine that there's something that's going to happen that will affect your investment in a negative way, then you need to take steps and talk to people who are smarter than me about it to mitigate those, or maybe you make hay from it, I don't know. And of course, what I'm getting at here is when Alberta leaves Confederation, the Canadian dollar will inevitably change one way or another. You have to figure out which way you think it's going to change and act accordingly to protect your wealth. And that goes with anything, not just Alberta independence. Any type of thing. Like, the government's going to implement this policy. You need to think ahead and decide how that's going to affect your money, and then plan for it.
Thanks.
Okay, I think that is the last question. I'm going to ask what's that? How about which?
Do you have a question, Wayne, or is it a comment?
Yeah, I do. This one's kind of a history question. So, groundwork. First, I'm to understand that Quebec did not choose to sign the Federation in the early 80s under Pierre Elliott Trudeau's effort. Is that true?
That is correct.
Okay, so now the next question as a part B is, I'm not understanding, if they aren't really part of the Federation, how in the world are they a separate sovereign province and allowed to have any kind of seating within Parliament as a country, a nation's government?
Well, because they are part of the Federation. They act like they're not, but they are. One other thing that Quebec did after the 1982 Constitution was they passed a law saying that they wouldn't listen to anything the federal government said. They actually passed a law saying that they would use the notwithstanding clause on every piece of federal legislation because they were so pissed off about it. So they used that on 300 or 400 pieces of federal legislation. No, we're not going to do it. No, we're not going to listen to you. We're our own, whatever. So the Supreme Court ruled that it didn't matter that they signed. It was still ratified. It still was in effect. Quebec still gets equalization payments. They still get representatives in the House of Parliament. They just act as if they're sovereign. That's all it is. And actually, it's a really good case study on sovereignty, what Quebec does. Benoit Trudeau, enough. Read his book. You can get it on Amazon. It's actually, it reads like a comedy, the way Quebec acts within Confederation. It's fantastic.
Okay, I believe that was the last question. Okay, so a couple of things. We have a lady that's going to come up and say a prayer in closing. But before we do that, can I ask that once we do, and that everybody help put everything away, and we return it to the way the hall was before. Okay, where is the lady that's going to come say the closing prayer? Okay, right here. Oh yeah, we had a good conversation earlier.
Go or just in front on the stage. Okay, but people can't see it. All right, never mind.
Heavenly Father, we ask for your guidance, collectively and individually, as we champion peace, freedom, and prosperity for the new country of Alberta. We give you thanks for our achievements thus far, and we ask for strength, courage, and protection as we go forward into uncharted territory. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you all for coming.
Yep. Good job, everybody. So, it's almost 10 p.m. and my brain is melting right now, which is kind of odd. So, thank you very much for tuning in. It's almost 10, and I want to thank you, everybody, for the super chats. Thanks, Derek, for being there on the chat. That was quite awesome for you. I really enjoyed. And also thank you to all the guys who was giving super chats and the $100 e-transfer that I just received. Hey, Corin, I got $100 e-transfer. I got a $100 e-transfer and 3 super chats. Yeah, Cory Morgan is right here. Yeah, so next events that I have confirmed is one in Gibbons, which is not too far from Edmonton, on Tuesday, next Tuesday. So at 7 p.m., they're going to have pierogies and that kind of stuff. It's going to be fantastic. You're going to bring your kiddos in there. Wednesday, I'm going to do an event for the Centurion Project. They're going to have Jason Levine, Mario Up North, David Parker, and another fellow, I just don't remember his name. They will be there as well. So we're looking forward to see you there next week, if that's the Edmonton area. Tomorrow I'm going to Fort Macleod, still on the south side of the province. So that was going to be at 7 p.m. 7 p.m. tomorrow. That's going to be the last in the Slick Stock Alberta series right now, and along with other interviews I'm going to be doing as well. So thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll see you tomorrow. And thanks very much for tuning in. Have a good one.